I think that a good citizen should be able to arm themselves and be able to defend themselves and, more importantly, their family. That's a reason why the reason why I carry is because I know that I love my family, and I know that if something was to happen in a situation where I couldn't defend them because I wasn't able to do that, or place myself in between danger and my family, I would never get over that. I don't think that's not a price I'm willing to pay, right? Hey, welcome back, Rainier Arms Firearms Academy, to another episode of Over the Barrel. And today I'm pretty excited to talk to my friend Drew Eddy from US LawShield. Now, Drew is going to tell us all about who he is, what his background is, and we're going to talk about an exciting program and how it helps the members of our academy and also the greater population of the United States. So welcome, Drew. We're excited to have you in here.
Thank you very much.
And I'm really excited you have a tie on. That really makes my day.
Well, this is my uniform, so.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So he looks good and he is good. So tell us who you are.
I appreciate it. Well, first off, happy to be here and thanks for the invite. So again, my name is Drew Eddy. I am based out of Denver, Colorado. That's where I grew up. Went to school. Went to DU Law School, and I spent the first half of my career, or half decade or so, at the Denver DA's office as a prosecutor. So in that capacity, I spent a few years doing misdemeanor and juvenile cases, kind of getting my feet wet, and that's really where they throw you in the deep end and you deal with thousands of cases. I think the first year that I was there, we had 20,000 cases among 12 deputies. So you really get trial by fire, you get the experience of everything that you're going to see. And then towards the end, the last couple of years I spent in district court. That's where you see the worst of the worst, the homicides, the rapes, the robberies, all that kind of stuff. We were in the general district court division, and a nickname that somebody came up with along the way was it's the knife and gun club, because 70% of the cases you see involve knives or guns or other weapons.
Yeah.
And then I've spent about 6 years in private practice. I left the Denver DA's office in 2016, and I've been doing private defense ever since. And since I started on the private side, we've been handling LawShield cases, and then just within the past 2 years, our responsibility for the members grew to a point where we really needed somebody that could devote all their time towards LawShield members. So my firm promoted me to partner and put me in the role to solely handle LawShield cases. And then since then, we've grown quite a bit. We are responsible for California members, Colorado, Wyoming, and Kansas. And I want to say we are responsible for around a little bit over 50,000 members total. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow. And you're also a gun owner.
I am. Mm-hmm.
And a father.
And a father of two. Yep,
Yep.
7 and 5. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience with firearms.
Yeah. So I certainly don't have as much experience as the people in this room. However, when I started learning more about self-defense over the past several years and getting into the laws, I applied for my concealed carry permit back in 2016. Actually have to renew it this year, which I'm going through that process right now. This is my everyday kind of carry firearm. It's the MR920 from Shadow Systems.
Fantastic gun.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of value jammed into that product package.
And that's exactly what sold it for me. When I went into Centennial Gun Club in Colorado, that's the description that they gave for me. And I don't carry probably as much as some people do, but when I'm going somewhere with my family and I'm going to be out in public and I'm not sure about the circumstances, this is the go-to carry weapon for me, and
Right
it's been
on.
very comfortable.
I like it. And what is your mode of carry? Do you carry strong hip or
Appendix. Yep.
That's the thin man's carry of choice. Very good. I like it. So carry a weapon, and you take good care of our people that may have to use their carry weapon in the defense of themselves and their family members. Talk to me a little bit about U.S. LawShield. What is that program, and how does it benefit not only the members of Rainier Arms Firearms Academy, but the nation as a whole, any firearm owner?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because I think people look into these programs and they're looking for, some type of quote unquote insurance for carrying. But the nice thing about U.S. LawShield is the benefits run a much broader gamut than just solely being there for you if you get into a situation, which certainly you want that in that situation. But I think it's important to understand kind of the greater benefits here. So, one thing that I should mention, I'm licensed in all 4 states that I mentioned. We have offices in all 4 states as well, and we work with local attorneys in all 4 states. So we have this huge network of support in everywhere that we go.
Okay.
So from a response perspective, something happens, we're ready to go. Now, on the other side, a lot of what I do from a day-to-day perspective is educate people. That's really my 9-to-5 job. The emergency stuff typically comes in late at night or on the weekends or on the holidays. There's exceptions, of course, but when I sit down at my desk, I'm talking to members every single day about changes in laws, changes in regulations, trying to educate them, putting out content for U.S. LawShield that they provide to the members so that people can stay up to date and be knowledgeable and lawful. That's the most important. So there's a broad gamut of benefits, and then depending on your specific situation, LawShield provides a number of programs that you can add on to your base membership. For example, if you're traveling, from Texas to here in Kansas, you can add on a multi-state coverage so that typically you're just covered in that your home state, but then it'll extend to the other 50 states and territories when you travel. And they have that. My personal thought on the best, or at least the most valuable one that they offer is something called bail bonds expert witness coverage, because a lot of people, they get the coverage and they think that from a financial perspective, everything's taken care of if they get into a situation. But one thing that people don't realize is all of the outside costs that can be associated with representation. So that includes investigators, experts, process servers. There's a lot of outside costs that are not covered within that original membership. And the bail bond expert witness, one of the benefits of that is experts' investigation costs that can get very expensive. My understanding is that's included. Now, I'll say as kind of as an asterisk here or a disclaimer, I'm independent of LawShield. We are their program attorneys. So when something is covered, they say, go. You represent this person. They give us the green light, and then we do the legal work. So as far as specific scope of coverage questions, I direct potential members or people that are interested in the program back to U.S. LawShield to discuss that. But this is what I've seen from an on the ground perspective.
Our experience with the professionals with U.S. LawShield has been nothing but just that, professional. They know the program inside and out. They're very, very good at explaining the benefits package to the customer. We try to have them in every time we have a concealed weapons class so that the new concealed weapons carrying person understands what that benefit of this package is, number one, and some things that is brought up during the presentation that we may or may not have switched a light on inside that customer, and then they're like, oh man, I really need to think about what would happen if I really had to protect myself. Heaven forbid you ever have to do that, but right. The professionals of U.S. LawShield have really done a really good job doing that.
Yeah, and to add on to that, one thing that I think is a common misconception about the program is that it's not necessarily a firearm program. Sure, we get the firearm cases, but it's a self-defense program. And I don't know the exact numbers, but a significant number of the cases that we have right now and have traditionally are non-firearm related. You know, there's situations where somebody got into an incident and they had to defend themselves with whatever they had. You know, we've had the pepper spray case, we've had the hand and fist case, we've had the knives case. You know, so LawShield will cover their members for any justified use of force type situation.
It's fantastic, and it's a low cost insurance of peace of mind for me. I know that as a business we try to cover all of our employees because we're carrying loaded firearms in the building because something bad could happen in here, and if you just look at local news and national news, you can find it. Some of these places where you're sitting have been targeted by bad people, and so we just try not to be. We try not to look like food, and one of the things that gives us a little more peace of mind is the fact that U.S. LawShield's behind us.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, we definitely try to do everything we can for not only the members but our private clients as well. My firm that I work for is Richards Carrington, and we take a white glove approach to all our clients. A significant number of those happen to be LawShield because we are their program attorneys. But yeah, that's our goal from Square One.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about a story that had happened to someone local that you guys were able to energize the system and help them out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a perfect one that is very timely for this conversation. And I've spoken with this client/member, and he really wants people to hear his story because it's one of those situations that anybody could find themselves in. This happened locally here in Wichita, and the gentleman was sitting at his home in his neighborhood. I believe it was a Sunday afternoon, and one of his neighbors, an elderly lady, came down looking for help because her adult son was having some type of breakdown. It wasn't exactly clear what, but he was acting out, and he was acting out violently. So she comes down to the client house basically looking for a little bit of assistance or at least somewhere to stay that she can feel protected. As the night goes on, there's some incidents that occur that are disturbing from this adult son, and ultimately it appears as if he's left, but the mother believes she's hearing something from her house that suggests maybe there's property being damaged or the son has come back and has done something. She wants to go down at that point to her house to make sure that her property is secure, and the client reluctantly just agrees to go with her. Well, let me back up. I shouldn't say reluctantly. He was reluctant about the idea of going down there, but he said, essentially, if you're going to go, let me come with you at least because it seems like a dangerous situation. So they go down, don't see anything that raises an eyebrow. They turn back around, and as they're coming back home, and keep in mind this is about 9 p.m. at night, so it's dark out. They hear a noise behind them, turn around, and the son is sprinting at them. And full speed, sprinting at them, can't see much other than this person is coming. So the client pulls his carry weapon, makes a number of commands for the gentleman to stop. He doesn't, and then when he's within basically reaching distance, a few feet, that's when he fires. And ultimately ends up killing this man, unfortunately, but maybe fortunate for both the client and the mother that was also right there. So that's kind of the background of the incident. And then he was fortunately he had a membership with U.S. LawShield. He called us as soon as he could, and we got working on the case right away. This was pre-charging. So sometimes what will happen is somebody will be arrested and then they'll be held in custody, and the district attorney will make a charging decision rather quickly. given the elements of this situation, I believe what happened, though I can't get into the minds of law enforcement, but what I believe happened is they released him while they could conclude their investigation. And fortunately, that gave us some time to do our investigation.
Okay.
And we were able to pull a significant amount of records and information about the deceased that basically showed that, you know, he was very close to severely injuring or killing somebody. It was just a matter of time. So I prepared a packet, essentially, you know, I would call it basically a mitigation packet that I presented to both the homicide detective and the district attorney here in Wichita. And again, I'm just speculating as to what, you know, made their decision, but I would hope that this, you know, that information that I provided helped them see the bigger picture.
Sure.
And ultimately, they declined charges in the case. So, you know, fortunate for this member, for this client, you know, it was a good person that found themselves in a very difficult situation. And fortunate for them, they had the membership that we could get started early. And really help them out, you know. And we were talking about this a little bit before to try to put the financial perspective on this. I probably put in over 100 hours on this case over the course of, you know, 3 weeks, getting this information together, talking with the detective and the prosecutor, and then presenting this packet.
Before it even sat down in front of a trial, right?
Exactly. Before it even ended up in a courthouse. And that was the goal, put all this effort up front to have a genuine and objective conversation with law enforcement now to provide them all the information that they need to make this decision now, instead of trying to unravel a charging decision after it gets into the court system, which is much more difficult to do.
Wow, and then I think that you know, you talk about you did 100 hours before it even got to a trial situation, you know, and that's, you know, if you just do the simple math on that, that's $400,000, right? You're not even talking about the time at the trial and maybe from expert witnesses and more evidence you had to dig up and stuff. Man, you're looking at $500,000 pretty quick, I would think.
It can get up there. So I think I on a private basis, my hourly is about $400.
Okay.
So, you know, right there, if I'm doing the math right, that's $40,000 for 100 hours. You know, that somebody that doesn't have this type of coverage would have to pay out of pocket.
Gosh.
But then the other part of it is it's not even before a trial. It's just even before the case gets to the court system.
Yep.
Because after that, there's preliminary hearings, there's there's immunity hearings, there's you know, substantive other types of hearings, motions hearings, and then there's trial. So there's usually, you know, 8 to 12 months of other court activity even before you get to trial.
I can't imagine how much that would cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always added a zero to things.
Well, you're in the right, you know, the right amount when we're talking about a homicide case to actually take on that from a private perspective. It's absolutely a six-figure case. Easy.
Yeah, and you know, that's got to financially ruin people, even if they did the right thing, right? So that's the scary piece of that. And here's a guy from so now I'm transplanted here to Wichita, right? So I grew up in a rural community on the East Coast, and the Wichita, a field in Wichita is very similar to that. You know, people look after one another, and if they see someone in distress, like this gentleman did, and they said, well, you know, just, you know, he was trying to take care of that person because they're humans, and we treat each other right.
Right.
And then he found himself in a self-defense situation. He defended his life and the life of the lady, and then because he had the good fortune and forethought to join this organization and protect himself that way, you guys were able to jump in there and make sure the right decision was made very quickly. To help out someone who may be, like you were talking about before, in your former life, those prosecutors were inundated with things, right? So what's the easiest, you know, so water goes down the least path of resistance, right? So what's the least path of resistance there? Charge them and let it figure out, let it wash itself out, right? Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last night. So I think that you guys being able to come in there and really help out the way you did is a great is a great benefit for the customer. Plus, it really will reinforce other people that feel like they want to do the right thing and help out their fellow man. And then if they're protected themselves, it gives them hope that they're not going to be on an island by themselves having to deal with it, right?
Right, absolutely.
So, man, how very cool. And that's a great story. And I understand the gentleman got his firearm back, and there were some other things that, some other good news stories that came out of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the nice thing about when we represent somebody. It's not just the initial representation. It's making sure all the loose ends are taken care of as well. And this is just one story. I could tell you stories from Colorado, California that are very similar homicide situations where we did the exact same thing.
So, do you find yourself? So we talked a little bit about last night about the misconception that you guys just poof like the insurance sales guy, and some of the, I forget what insurance company that is, where they you have a problem and the insurance guy just comes out of nowhere. Right. But the customer has to contact you, right? But they have to be aware of their rights to begin with, right?
Yeah. It certainly helps to be aware of your rights to begin with, and that's why I travel around and I talk to people all the time so that they have that knowledge ahead of time. I can't expect everybody is going to know the exact language that they need to use in any given situation, and I mean, these situations are the most stressful you'll ever find yourselves in. So, typically when we get a call, we have a 24-hour hotline that connects with multiple attorneys. So, if one's in the shower or something, it's not going to be missed. We have a group of attorneys that answer the call. I've taken these calls at 3 a.m. multiple times. My wife loves that, but I'll continue to do it. But yeah, if I can talk to somebody quickly, I can give them the very basic, straightforward advice, which is always, until we know more, you need to invoke your right to remain silent and ask for an attorney, specifically ask for an attorney. And I tell people, look, you don't need to be, you can still be cooperative. You can still appear cooperative to law enforcement.
Sure.
You don't have to be a jerk. You can say, look, I want to help your investigation. I want you to hear my side of the story, but I need to speak to an attorney first to make sure that my rights are protected. And law enforcement understand that. But if you use the language, I want to speak to an attorney, that is the universal cue for law enforcement to stop all questioning. And they can't re-engage unless you went and tapped on the door and said, I want to talk to you about this or something like that. They cannot re-engage with you. So it's so important to make that call as quickly as you can, and to know that in advance. And then, once that has occurred, then there will be no interrogation until the attorney is involved, and that gives us time to facilitate that, to be with the client, to help that process, that interaction with law enforcement.
Man, I think as humans, that's going to be that's one of the hardest things to do, because you just want to get your story out because you just went through an amazing amount of stress and trauma in your own life where, sometimes these people are even related to you that you had to use deadly force on.
Right.
And you just want to talk to someone. That's got to, man, I can't imagine the amount of discipline it would take just to be quiet in that situation.
Well, and it's interesting, the best way I can think to describe this to people, or to put it in some type of context, is I'm sure the military has a similar policy and guidelines. Most states for local law enforcement, when they're involved in use of force situations, they're given 2 or sometimes even 3 days, 3 sleeps, depending on the state, before they provide a statement to their agency. So a trained law enforcement officer, hopefully trained, that has been in traumatic situations in the past, probably has a better stress controller than your average person, is given minimum 2, sometimes 3 sleeps before they are to provide any type of statement. So the average Joe that just had to use their firearm in self-defense and killed somebody, to think that that person is going to be able to provide a coherent statement 10 minutes after this occurred is just ludicrous. It won't happen. It'll come out with good intention, but it won't come out right, and those words will be used against that person.
In my former life, I dealt with the tip of the spear for, meeting and engaging the enemy, and the old adage is the first report's always wrong. So develop the situation. Let time take into consideration and let all the information flow in. So it's very similar to what you were talking about. And in the military, a lot of times we had to write statements at the conclusion of our patrol. So that's 12 to 14 hours usually after an event occurred, and you're fatigued and whatever. And so not all of the best information was in there. So, but when we compiled the packets, we were able to go back and re-interview each one of the people involved and see what kind of things they remembered. And it's amazing how the amount of detail that comes back after the fact.
Yep.
So yeah, that's excellent point. Excellent point. So man, what a great news story. Don't be afraid to come in here to Rainier Arms Firearms Academy. I know this is a shameless plug at this point, but you come on in here and we can help you out. Plus, Drew and his colleagues are going to be scheduling seminars and classes, so you can come in here and understand what your rights are. You can understand what happens after there's a shooting. You can understand, though, how not to look like food. And these guys will come in here and educate us. And it's one of the benefits of you being a member, okay? And it's free to you. I think there's a nominal charge for those that are not members, but it's free to members to come in here and educate that. So transition into a little bit outside of what we've done locally. Can you talk to me a little bit about the Supreme Court's decision on the gun club case and how that affects because people are seeing this are not only in Kansas, they're seeing this across the globe, hopefully. And so you can talk to them a little bit about what your understanding is of how that affects everyone else and how it might affect gun laws and current gun laws on the books in the future.
Yeah, so obviously one of the biggest most consequential Supreme Court cases in recent history addressing the Second Amendment. This is, for people that are somewhat aware of it or maybe not aware of it at all, this is a case that originated out of New York. There are, I believe, 6 or 7 states in our country that operate under what's considered a may issue licensing scheme for concealed carry permits. And without getting into the weeds too much, but may issue essentially means that there is some additional requirement in that state statute that requires the applicant to provide proof of good cause or proper cause to have that permit. It's generally something that is considered beyond your average just want to protect yourself for self-defense reasons to carry. So the best way I can describe this, and it's never really been defined perfectly, but the best way I can describe it is you have to be able to show something in these states that sets you apart from the general public. So let's say you're a realtor and you're in homes by yourself often. That puts you at a higher risk. You transport money or valuables for your work. You drive through high crime neighborhoods regularly when you're commuting back and forth for work. And sometimes these specific examples aren't enough. It's completely discretionary to the issuing authority to decide, is that enough under the statute or not? And it also varies within the state. So for example, in California, you may be able to get a concealed carry permit up in, or not up in, but in like Riverside area. But if you're in the LA area, regardless of the good cause reason that you provide, the issuing authorities, traditionally will not issue that permit. So the Supreme Court case addressed New York's version of that may issue licensing scheme. And it was a couple gentlemen that were denied concealed carry permits. They were issued other permits for, I believe, going hunting and maybe to the gun range, that kind of thing. But the general carry permits were denied. So they challenged that, and the Supreme Court accepted it for review, which is the first time the Supreme Court has done that, really since McDonald and Heller, back in, I think it was the early 2000s and late, and maybe like 2008, something like that, were those two cases. And they specifically addressed that issue. Can a state impose this additional kind of blurry, undefined requirement of showing good cause or proper cause. And the Supreme Court determined that was unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. So these 6 or 7 states that have this licensing scheme now have to remove that additional requirement.
That's amazing. So I don't know. There's probably no number that will support this, but I can't imagine, having to show cause. I mean, the bad guy that's going to attack you won't send you an email saying, "Hey, I'm going to attack you at the corner
Right.
here and rob you tomorrow, so you better have your gun." So that's it would and being prepared and knowing you have you're in a situation where you need to defend yourself is universal, right? No matter who you are or where you live. None of us get to choose none of us get to choose the battleground, right? That it's going to come to you at the least expected moment, and from the least expected way, and able to and having a government be able to try to tell you that, or try to make you explain how much you need to defend yourself is there's no better word for it. It seems dumb to me. You know what I mean? It's very short-sighted.
Well, and there's no consistency either under the may issue scheme, because you just based off of where you live is going to make the difference on whether you're able to obtain that permit to protect yourself, be able to protect yourself, because the sheriff in one county will say, well, carrying in public for self-defense is a good cause for me, but another county down the road, the sheriff is going to say, no, you need to show something extra. So you could have a group of people in one area getting their permits and a group in the other not. So this ruling changes all that.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting to hear all the media that surrounds this thing, and it's a head scratcher for sure. I mean, I have another reaction to that kind of information, but the kindest thing I can say is a head scratcher for me. And the initial reactions from the talking heads in front of the screen is like, everyone on the subway is going to have a gun now. That's not true, right? Not everyone not everyone. All the good guys that apply for a permit can get one, possibly. But the bad doers, they're not sweating that law at all.
Right. Well, and the additional thing is, to get a permit in most states, it's not like you walk down, get your picture taken, and they hand it to you. There's all the requirements, a background check, depending on the state, training that you have to go through, education courses, those kinds of things to get the permit. None of that goes away with this ruling. It doesn't give carte blanche authority for anybody to now just take a gun and walk around with it. Now, of course, there are states, Kansas being one, where you can carry without a permit.
Right.
But my experience dealing with people that truly are lawful and want to be responsible, they educate themselves beforehand, and they see the value of a permit anyways. There's reasons to get a permit even if your state doesn't have that requirement.
Sure.
So the Bruin case doesn't do away with any of that type of stuff.
Right. So what's the down the road consequences of this decision?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think California is probably going to be the test state to see. I'm trying to keep my thumb on the pulse of what's going on there, and they can no longer require good cause to issue a permit, but they are imposing other regulations that at least the legislatures or the legislative body believes is in tune with the Bruin decision, that will further narrow regulations within the state. And then on the other side of things, the Bruin opinion has language that appears broad enough where different groups may be able to challenge different things like assault weapon bans, high capacity magazine bans, different red flag laws. All of those could be challenged under the Bruin decision, and we'll wait and see. We'll see if that falls within the parameters.
There's a lot of us in this firearms industry that think that any law that governs controls the 2A situation is not a valid law, And there's, many of us and many of the people out there that think that, there's got to be something that controls the access, right? I'm of the former. I think that a good citizen should be able to arm themselves and be able to defend themselves, and more importantly, their family. That's a reason why the reason why I carry is because I know that I love my family, and I know that if something was to happen in a situation where I couldn't defend them because I wasn't able to do that, or place myself in between danger and my family, I would never get over that. And I don't think that's not a price I'm willing to pay, right? So I think that as we explore this ruling and then things become more clear about our freedoms under the Constitution, man, it has nothing to do but make people safer, in my opinion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and at least these issues are being addressed, right?
Sure.
That's the importance of having this discussion. And some states are approaching it one way, and other states are going the other direction. And we will see, how that pans out. But prior to this case at least being accepted to be heard in front of the Supreme Court, these issues were dying at the appellate level, based off of previous precedent in U.S. case law. So at least now these issues are making it, to the highest court, and they're making it to have this discussion and have a real discussion about where things are at.
Wow. So we're still the freest country on the planet, right? Where some of these things are concerned, and I think that that's a great thing. I mean, I had a conversation with someone the other day that had some disparaging things to say about the country, and as a veteran, I tend to bristle up a little bit about that. But the way the person brought the situation and the conversation to me, I was able to throttle back a little bit, actually receive the communication, and then respond in a way that made sense. And well, it made sense to me. I don't know if it made sense to them or not. But my ability to talk a little bit about how, we have a lot of flaws here, and we have a lot of problems we need to work on. There's a lot of populations in our country that need help, and there's a lot of populations in our country that need more equity. There's a lot of populations in our country that need to be heard more. Absolutely, I agree with all that. However, we're still the best country on the planet, and if you have never spent any time outside this country, you should try that. And you'll be right back here saying, wow, I really enjoy living in the United States.
Well, having these conversations is an example of that, right? Being able to have that discourse between people that are aligned in their beliefs and not aligned. And I think that's extremely important for both sides to be able to have that conversation. And, there's the U.S. is one of the few where you can have that open discourse.
I can't help but think that as flawed and as the amount of difficulties we have within this country, there are millions of people trying to get in here every year. I wonder why that is. Probably because it's a pretty good place to live.
Right.
Raise your family in a safe environment. I love it. So let's talk about the 2A. We're talked a little bit about the 2A environment already. Well, what do you think that the 2A environment is going to do in the next 3 to 5 years?
Right. It's a great question, and it depends on where you live, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on your perspective. Because one thing that the Supreme Court seems set on doing, at least with this most recent opinion, is saying, and with some other opinions that I won't get into, but they're basically putting it back on the states in a lot of ways to make their own determinations for their citizens, for their residents. So, for example, in California, you can bet, unless the legislature changes, but for the foreseeable future, you will continue to see additional regulations. You will continue to see those additional regulations be challenged, and then there will be a whole proceeding on, whether that's a violation of the Second Amendment or not. It'll go up the court system. In Colorado, where I'm from, we are, if I'm trying to put it within the spectrum, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Over the past several years, there have been a number of new regulations imposed One of them is undoing the state preemption laws, which we've had preemption for 20-some years, that basically says firearm regulation is governed by the state level, and local governments cannot change that. But this new law that Colorado enacted allows local governments now to do that. And the problem, at least from my perspective, that I have in trying to educate people is that laws change in Colorado based off of the jurisdiction you're in. So you can be legal in one and not legal in another. And that makes it very difficult for people that really want to do the right thing, want to follow the law, to know what the law is.
Sure.
But for LawShield members, they can call me and I'll explain it to them. So that's nice, and a huge benefit for people that have the membership. But it doesn't make it, it's still difficult to understand. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, Wyoming and Kansas, the state legislature has seemed to go the other direction as far as allowing people to make their own decisions. You still have to be you can't be a prohibited person from possessing a firearm, but
Sure.
Otherwise, lawful adults can carry firearms, can possess firearms. There's not really any restriction. So it's really going to depend, I think, where you live.
Wow. So just like everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what laws there are, right? If the laws and the political climate in the place you live doesn't match your what you understand to be true,
Mm-hmm.
then you go someplace where it does.
Right.
And I'll tell you my own personal story with that. In the Northwest, California, Oregon, and Washington, they all start to align themselves politically, and then your freedoms are starting to be infringed upon in those places at different levels. So really it became uncomfortable, but also became really lucrative to leave. So I was able to sell my house for quite a bit more money than I bought it for.
There you go.
And then move to a place that was more free and more in line with my values.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to take the money that I made there and then buy a nice home here, and I'm living in a community that's very friendly to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't be, my grandchildren will be raised in a place that's very friendly, very safe, and not as expensive as some of the other places you're paying extra to live in a place where you're not as free, which is a little bit weird to me.
Right. No, that's great. I mean, you have to decide what your values are and make the decision of where you want to live that are in tune with those values.
For sure.
Because the one thing that this ruling doesn't do is it's not going to completely change the landscape of gun laws across the country.
Right.
That'll be something that's litigated and argued over for decades to come.
As a matter of fact, didn't New York turn around and add some laws to the books that were as arbitrary as the ones that were thrown out by the Supreme Court?
I'm sure they did. I don't know. I know California did. But yeah, I mean, that's the natural response. Actually, now that you mention it, there was something about providing social media records, I think, in New York.
Yeah, social media records.
Right.
Holy smokes!
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's interesting.
I don't expect you to get into this with me, but it seems like every time we have some kind of bad incident happen, where multiple people are shot by someone who would do themselves and other people harm, where one, there was a mental health issue there, and two, that they were known by an entity. I can't help but think if one, the resources that have to be in place to help and protect us weren't so overwhelmed by short staffing and budget issues and all those things, that we could maybe head off some of those things, and that person would be a better member of society instead of a mass killer.
Right. And
crazy.
those are the incidents that get national coverage, right? I mean, they're horrible. They're they affect communities for years and decades. But when we're talking about gun violence, I'm a lawyer, so I'm not going to. This isn't my expertise, but looking at the statistics, the violence happens on a day-to-day local level. It's not these mass atrocities. Of course, that is happening too. But when we're looking at the numbers of what causes gun deaths, I suspect that that's a small fraction. So really, when we're talking about what regulations, what type of laws can affect gun deaths and gun violence. It's the local level issues, in communities that cause the majority of those problems.
It also seems to me that the more restrictive laws where your self-defense is concerned, the less it seems they trust their citizens. As a patriot, I want to. That's suspicious to me. Why don't they trust us? I mean, the reason why we're a country that we are today is because we rebelled against an oppressive government, right? We threw all their tea in the bay, right? We told them that we wanted some representation if we're going to pay these taxes, and that didn't happen. And then, in 1776, a bunch of dudes got together and signed their own death warrant, basically, and said, we're breaking up with you guys in England, and have a nice day. And we fought a war over several years to make us a country. It's not perfect. They wrote a great document that's lived 47 years now. So that document is remarkable. And that document, and gentlemen like yourself, all the way up to into our Supreme Court, are sworn to what? To protect that document. Right, and then protect what it says. And I think it's because it's written by real visionaries that had absolutely no idea what was going to happen in 2022, right? That if we should protect that document and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I explain to people, that the politics get messy. The politics are something that I'm not interested in. What I'm interested in is educating people so that they can be lawful. The laws are on the books, and that's what they are currently. So I want to educate people of what they are. Our Constitution is our supreme law, and I want to educate people of what the Constitution means and what protections you have under the Constitution. And when I go into court and I represent somebody, I'm representing and protecting their constitutional rights, and that's my goal. As an aside, that's something that you mentioned that I think is worth noting. If it helps, I think sometimes people confuse gun regulation and self-defense. And sure, there is an overlap there. You can protect yourself with a firearm. But as far as state laws pertaining to self-defense, those are typically not involved in the conversation of gun regulation. And it varies. There are different parameters based from state to state on what is considered self-defense. But for the most part, every state follows some type of, similar path or similar understanding. Imminency of the threat, proportionality of the use of force in response to the threat. More protection inside your home. You're considered to have more privacy and greater level of legal protection inside your home than outside. Those kinds of things. That's, for the most part, pretty universal in our country. Yep. And when these debates about what type of regulations should come up or what type of changes to the law should come up, they typically don't involve self-defense. Those have been tried and true, and they've stayed pretty solid in our country.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't put those two together until just now, but every place I've lived, there's your right to self-defense within your dwelling is pretty ironclad.
Yep.
Where it gets a little fuzzy is after dark, or when you're outside the home, or when you're traveling from state to state. Those are when things get a little bit fuzzy. And I'm glad there's an organization like what you guys have here that educate the customer and put them, and helps an honest person stay honest, right?
Absolutely.
And that's brilliant. Right on, man. So, is there a greater fight for our Second Amendment rights coming, or are we at the crescendo of that with this decision, you think?
No, I think both sides of this spectrum will continue to fight for what they believe in. For example, one thing that I've been dealing with over the past couple of weeks in talking with members is about the Attorney General, that somebody from that office leaked a bunch of identifying information for CCW applicants and CCW holders within the state. To the public. And obviously it's a huge concern to these people. It's a threat to them and their families. It's certainly a risk. There's a variety of issues, but there's organizations that are looking at potential litigation against the Attorney General. There's obviously organizations that are looking at litigation against some of the regulations like assault weapon bans, high capacity magazines, those kinds of things. So now, we have a general understanding of what is the Supreme Court's belief is the limits of the Second Amendment for concealed carry in public or carry in public. But now there's all these loose ends with, how far does this ruling go? Does it make large capacity magazine bans unconstitutional as well? And that's the next step. That's what we'll see over the next several years. Yeah.
It'll certainly be interesting. I think that my personal view is that we'll have some shrinkage of the regulation against the Second Amendment freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that will be in contrast to certain places like you mentioned, New York, California, maybe New Jersey, Connecticut,
mm-hmm.
places like that. They will expand whatever control they think they can over citizens' rights, and it's up to the citizens of those states to rebel against that and elect officials that'll take care of their interests.
It's a democratic process. That's right.
Man, and that's it's what did Churchill say about that? So it's a horrible means of government, but it's the best on the planet.
The best of bad options.
The best of bad options, I think is what he said. So, talk to me about where can people find out more about. First of all, is there anything else you want to add to the conversation? Is there anything you want to talk about?
I would say that probably the first step any firearm owner should take, beyond the range training and the tactical training that you guys all provide, mm-hmm. Which is extremely important, is to get yourself into a class and learn the legal aspects behind use of force, because we've only kind of hit the tip of the iceberg on self-defense today. Mm-hmm. When I go and I teach a class, it's usually a minimum of about 3 hours, and that just covers self-defense 101. That's the basics, and then I do other classes that are equally long, just on updates of gun laws or just the Castle Doctrine or a specific issue. So you can really get in depth, and the more that you sit in on these classes, regardless of whether you're a LawShield member or not, this applies. But the more you sit in on these classes, the more muscle memory you have. You're creating muscle memory in your brain to think about these issues. So if, God forbid, you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to defend yourself, hopefully some of that will come back. You've thought about it. Maybe you practice certain scenarios, and it's not on the fly in the moment when you need that education the most. So that would just be more of a practical tip: educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself.
Wow, that's so important. I know that we had several students that took an education class about self-defense 101, and then the next class they took was an immersion class that we have about defending yourself in different scenarios, and it was a two-way range using simunitions. Mm-hmm. And when they deployed a firearm and engaged the assailant, immediately they started doing the math in their head, like, wow, did I do the right thing? So they started taking it apart there. And then I've had some students that didn't shoot because they were taking the situation apart. And they were, and one student was accurate in their assessment, and the other student simulated being killed because they were too cerebral at the time.
Right.
So
well, and what do you do after the shot, right? I mean, I could do a whole class just on that.
Sure.
The steps to take immediately after you have to defend yourself. That's when the rest of your life begins.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, there are so many dynamics here. I mean, in Colorado, to get your concealed carry permit, you don't even have to fire a single round in your life. You just have to go and take an education course. Yeah. Personally, I think that's foolish. Regardless of what the law says, be prepared, and part of that preparation is being familiar with what you're using to defend yourself if you had to, and also an understanding of what the law permits for justified use of force.
Right. Well, I tell you, if you're on the range with us, and I'm out there and I see a hole in place that you didn't intend to put it, I say, you know, every one of those bullets that come out of your gun and there's a lawyer attached to it. Please don't take offense.
Not at all.
But every one of those bullets that are launched, there's a lawyer attached to it. So you got to know where that bullet went. Did it sail through? And you got to know that your target's background and foreground, right? And those are just part of the tenets of firearm safety. And the more you train those, and the more it's drilled home to you, the more times that you'll take. You know, I know a guy that defended himself with a firearm, and he actually had to take a kneeling position to get the angle of the shot so it wouldn't hit a bystander behind him.
No kidding.
And then, you know, the ability to understand that right out as things were unfolding was amazing to me.
Yeah,
and he says, I never would have thought about it had I not trained on the range. Right?
I when I teach some classes, I'll typically show this video, and I'm not sure where it is. It's a news clip, but it's at a casino, and there's an older gentleman sitting at one of the slot machines, and a number of armed robbers come in, and he stands up, can still carry, you know, it's a Good Samaritan type situation, shoots at the robbers. I think he hits one or two of them. They flee. Nobody else is injured. So all in all, it looks like a Good Samaritan type situation. You know, kudos to him. Could have probably saved a lot of lives. You roll the tape back and you pause it, and when he's taking one of the shots, there's a clerk standing right behind where this particular robber is standing.
Goodness.
So, you know, fortunately she wasn't hit, but, you know, had she been, in some states there's going to be potential criminal liability, but pretty much in every state there's definitely going to be civil liability. She's not going to file a lawsuit maliciously against this person because she's upset necessarily, but she's going to have damages. She's going to have money out of pocket for, you know, whatever medical expenses or other expenses that cost, or what were the effect of that, you know, missed shot. So a lot of people don't think about that. There is liability well beyond, you know, just the criminal side.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've talked a lot about some things, and I think that the most important thing we're learning from what we're dealing with today is it's super important to, 1, be educated, 2, train, 3, find out what systems in your area or around you that can assist you, and then get educated. Have Drew talk to you about it, right? So, Drew, I can't tell you enough about how much it means to us at Rainier that you were able to take the time and fly here specifically to talk to our customers and allow us to give some more information out.
Oh, I
so
appreciate
thank you so
that.
much.
Yeah,
brother.
absolutely. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
All right. So as we wrap this thing up, you know, it's going to be, you know, Over the Barrel, right? It's going to be on YouTube, and we're trying to get it out on Spotify. So take a look at it out there. Share it with your friends. Right? Keep it in mind that these are two guys talking. Right? So all of our ideas aren't perfect, but we're able to share some information, and hopefully it helped you guys make the best decisions. So let's be careful out there, continue to train, and get educated. Thanks.